Hey friends, you're watching BrainStormAcres. I'm Henry.
And I'm Irene.
Today we're going to go out and harvest some potatoes out in the outside garden. They've been in there since, what, the 4th of May or thereabouts?
Yeah, the beginning of May, yep, for sure. I think, I think the 4th of May actually. And we'd actually planned to harvest them in stages, and then we planned to harvest them all about a month ago, and it just didn't happen. It seemed like every time that we really had the time, there was a major thunderstorm coming in, and either the stuff was wet,
yeah,
or there was too much lightning to be outside.
Come along with us. We're going to go outside and start trying to harvest some of those potatoes. Well, that was an interesting job.
I tell you what, that was the hardest I've worked in a while. We were really lucky today. One of the reasons we decided to do it today was the fact that it wasn't going to be super hot and it was going to be sunny. It actually turned out to be a little less sunny this morning, which was great because we would have roasted to death if it hadn't been. It was a lot of work. That bed has been amended and amended and amended, but it's still a lot of junky clay.
It has an awful lot of clay. My hands got sore pushing on that shovel because what we needed to do was move the shovel along the hardware cloth that's in the bottom of that bed and then pop the
potatoes out.
Well, not the potatoes.
Super.
No, we weren't popping the potatoes out. We were popping the clay balls out.
Really, clay balls out, yeah. Well, that bed is one of the shallowest beds we have. And I have actually thought about rebuilding it and stuff like that. It's just so much work to rebuild a bed. And that's built on the side of a hill, which is particularly problematic. So,
well, maybe we'll plant some things other than root crops in that area.
Usually I plant something like tomatoes or
green beans right.
Or something else like that. It's just that when we were trying to plant early this year, that was one of the beds that was available and ready to go. It had been cleared and it had been amended and everything else. So that's what we went with. But what we figured out today is we need to add a lot more pelleted gypsum to that and really break up the clay balls and add a lot more compost. And I'm thinking we'll probably put a legume in there next year So maybe even our soybeans or something like that.
I was going to say soybeans would be a really good idea, actually.
Right, because we could plant it in stages, which is part of the deal. We planted soy, and that's kind of another video, but we planted soy this year and loved it, and we want to plant way more next year.
Yeah, it's really small patches, only about 3 feet, maybe 4 feet long.
4 feet long. 4 feet long, and loved it, just loved it. But we want to plant it in stages because soy generally comes off all at once. And we actually had some that was a little staggered because of the early damage from the deer. But other than that. So potatoes.
Potatoes.
Yes. We actually grew a whole stack of potatoes.
You may recall that we got a sample pack of
2 sample packs
of potatoes from Haas Tools. They're really great. The only issue with a lot of these sample packs is
coyotes.
You're right, it is.
Let me go get Isa in.
Yes.
Hold on.
You know, we don't hunt the coyotes on our property. We let them run through. Irene's gone outside to retrieve Isa, our cat, because we don't like either of our animals outside when the coyotes are running. And right now, they're running really close. Did you have success getting her?
I did. She was right by the door.
She was right by, I'll bet she was right by the door.
She doesn't normally care about it, actually, but she just happened to be right by the door. So I just opened the door and she came right in, which is a good thing. It means I didn't have to chase her around the yard.
Well, anyway, we got 2 sets of trial potatoes. They were sampler packs. Now, the only issue when you get a sampler pack is that you don't necessarily get an even number of potatoes from each of the varieties. And one of the problems we had is that we got 4 potatoes of one variety and 2 of one that we were actually interested in checking out.
Well, we've gotten sample packs from other companies before, and they were, I mean, I know we got our total poundage. I wasn't concerned about that. But the other companies were a little bit more conscientious about making sure that the quantity of potatoes per type was more even. We were pleased with the germination rate that we had from Haas.
Yeah, so when they were chitting, they sprouted up really nice.
We had very close to 100% germination in terms of the plants, you know, coming up off the tubers and stuff like that. The reason we tried it was, first of all, we've gotten our potatoes from 2 locations before. We've gotten them from Johnny's, and we've gotten them from 3 locations, Tractor Supply and Home Depot. Home Depot just plain didn't have them when we were looking for them, or they had some weird things that didn't even give a variety name. We weren't interested in that. We wanted to try specific varieties, or know at least what the variety was, so if it did well, we'd know to get it again, and if it did crappy, we'd know not to get it again.
And Tractor Supply was really outrageous price, and there weren't a lot of options, and on top of that, they didn't look very good.
Though I didn't think the price was outrageous. It's pretty much normal. You don't realize how expensive potatoes are. But
it was outrageous.
Right.
For potatoes that were in bad shape.
Well, the problem was they were desiccated, basically. They were little raisins instead of potatoes. And they didn't have many, they only had 1 or 2 things, which is typical of your box stores. They don't have a big selection. And you have to hit it just right when the stuff comes in, otherwise you don't get the selection you want. Johnny's didn't have them this spring. They were shut down basically because they were overwhelmed. I was not going to sit around and wait to see if they were going to get their act together. So I went with Haas Tools.
Great service.
Great service we got, but they don't ship according to where you live. One thing I used to like about Johnny's is when you were ordering something that needed to be planted at a specific time for where you live, they gave you the option of choosing. Like when I bought asparagus roots from them, crowns, they allowed you to choose when you wanted your asparagus crowns, because I can say I'm in 7B, and that means nothing west of the Mississippi. Nothing, because they doesn't take into consideration altitudes and things like that.
Well, at least we're 7B. We know that, but
but
beyond that, it doesn't tell us much.
But there's people in 7B who have a totally different growing season than I do on the East Coast. Totally different. And even your mom, who's only off from, I think, us by like one, I mean, her season is not, it's staggered. Her first day of frost and her last day of frost and all that stuff are very different from ours.
Now, our friend CB at CB's Greenhouse and Garden said that his first frost date is about the same as ours here, and he lives in North Carolina.
Right, right. And an awful lot of it has to do with how close you are to the coast and how high your altitude is. Because the coast always modifies, it moderates the temperature. The ocean is a big heat sink that releases heat slowly, or it can be a cold sink too, which can be a problem. In fact, they were concerned about that earlier this year. I don't think it's worked out that way, but they were concerned, listening to the weather guys, that there might be a large block of cold water off the coast of the southeast. And if it stayed there, then when they would get something like one of the blue northers coming down up from Canada, it would freeze the bejesus out of them, and because he wouldn't have that moderating effect of the warm water. So it does look like that cold spot went away, but that's always one of those things. So for us, we actually got potatoes, one of the varieties, in particularly Adirondack Blue, it was very heavily sprouted. And what we did was we planted 2 batches of them into buckets back in March.
Now, just because your seed potatoes are sprouted doesn't mean that you have to plant them right that instant. You can break those sprouts off. I prefer not
These
to.
were very, we anything that had a short sprout, we kept and we just stuck it in the fridge. But asking somebody to put like 20 pounds of potatoes in their fridge, because we had 2 packs, I'm sorry, I have a small fridge.
It's not all that small, but it's also not really big.
For a normal electric fridge, it's a small fridge. We're a propane fridge here, and propane fridges, just like the fridges in RVs, tend to be smaller.
Yeah, the whole unit is about 21 cubic feet, which includes the freezer.
You know, we're a little bit smaller. We always had much larger refrigerators than that, especially when we had kids at home with 3,000 children running through the house. I couldn't put 20 pounds of potatoes in my fridge and still have any room for anything else. The whole vegetable drawers and everything were full of potatoes. So, in addition to that, I was also treating some seeds in the cheese drawer, because, you know, why not?
Well, that's what you do.
You know, it has to be a drawer that's going to stay dry. And yeah, so I had seeds in there, and it worked. I got excellent germination. But
that's for the Rudbeckia.
There was Rudbeckia and a couple of other things too. I don't remember what off the top of my head, but they were in there, and they did a great job. But
we had a bunch of potatoes. How many varieties do we actually?
We actually planted 8 varieties. We did Adirondack Blue, French Fingerling, Viking, Kennebec White, Red Norland, Yukon Gold, Austrian Crescent, and German Butterball. Now,
I like the French Fingerling.
Yes, we enjoy the Adirondack Blue. It's fun. It's a blue potato. It does not lose the blue color when you cook it.
Yeah, which was surprising. Most blue vegetables or blue fruits, apart from things like blueberries,
right,
lose their color.
Yeah, like if you grow the Royal Burgundy green beans, they're a reddish purple color.
Right.
And when you cook them, they turn green. It's a darker green. It's a kind of a funky green, but it's still green. And what I figured out how to do years ago was I'll make dilly beans with those, and I do a cold pack on the dilly beans. That means all of the red is in the
brine, so it stays in the brine.
So it stays in the brine. So what you wind up with is pink brine, and it makes the really look cool, especially for gifts and stuff like that. We were a little surprised to see that the blue produced blue potatoes, and they were very tasty. It's a good potato.
It's an excellent potato,
and
it grew very, very well in the buckets.
Right. Now, the French Fingerlings we grew in the first bed that was harvested, and wow, unfortunately, that bed had been damaged by grubs.
Right.
But they were really tasty. We really, really liked the French Fingerlings. And reading about them, they are a gourmet potato that's considered to be like top of the line, very expensive if you can buy it.
And it's an excellent potato. I would use it, well, what I did was I boiled them and then tossed them with a little bit of butter and a little bit of salt, and that was just delicious. But
yeah, you don't really feel like you need to do a lot to them because they're just such a good potato.
But it would be a great potato if I was making potato salad. I'd boil them up, slice them across so that you have a bunch of pennies,
Yeah.
and then use that for potato salad.
Yeah. Now we harvested everything today. So we've harvested all the rest of our potatoes now.
30 pounds worth.
Yeah, there's about 30 pounds, and we haven't sorted them out by type yet. I know that we got very small quantities of a couple of them, most notably Kennebec White, but I only had a couple of seed potatoes for Kennebec White.
Well, one of the things that we learned about potatoes in that bed is that the heavy clay restricts the growth of the tubers.
Yeah.
Very, very, very significantly. The places where we put in the potting soil and other amendments, those potatoes did better.
I put potting soil and compost to fill them out and then just topped it with a little bit of the dirt. But I only had so much. I couldn't just mound it up willy-nilly and put in bags and bags. I just had so much. So basically it was as if I'd grown a bunch of these potatoes in 6-inch pots.
Yeah, it was pretty restrictive.
Yeah. And in addition to that, this was a hot summer. We knew that that bed was not the most fertile one we had. I did fertilize it, probably not as much as I should have. But you have to be careful with potatoes. You don't want to just wind up with 9,000 yards of vegetation and no potatoes. Did not get quite enough water, especially that end of it, the east end of it. That end is always hard to water. And that's why we actually modified the irrigation, which helped, but still wasn't quite enough. Definitely next year, I think we'll do legumes in there, but I have to get a bunch of pelleted gypsum. That will help to break up the clay. Because we need to break it down into small pieces first, because we had spent a bunch of time actually breaking it up as much as we could, but we were under time crunch. We had storms coming in, we had all kinds of wacky weather, late frost, everything else, and we were trying to get it in this little teeny tiny window that we had.
We had about 4 to 6 hours that was going to be usable for planting. What we did was actually dug 3 trenches.
Right. Just barreled through.
And we didn't particularly pay attention to which varieties were going where. They were kind of...
Well, I usually create a map, and I didn't get a map made this time. I had them by bunch. In other words, if you were in a row, the Adirondack blues would only be in that row. But then when I got done with Adirondack blue, what came next? And I remember where some of the stuff went in, but I didn't have my usual organized map thing. So I like to be really organized and know what everything is. We will be able to sort out everything. We've got busing trays full of potatoes in the kitchen, and I'll sort them out by type because I am curious to see what quantity we got of what. We actually took a lunch break in here and had a bunch of the Yukon Gold new potatoes for lunch.
Yeah, they were really small. They were maybe 1 inch to 1.25 inches long.
Yeah.
So I scrubbed them.
They were perfect.
I scrubbed them, sliced them in half, did a quick boil on them, tossed them with a little bit of butter and salt.
As I told him, I could have eaten twice as many. It would have been real easy.
I ate the other half.
Right. Well, that's only fair. But we will be definitely growing, assuming we can get it. I mean, there's always the question of can you get them. We will definitely grow French fingerling again.
Yeah, but I don't want to plant them outside, I don't think. I think I want to plant them in buckets.
We're going to do buckets because for us to keep the sheer volume of dirt as heavily watered as it takes to make the potatoes really happy here, takes too much water. Just takes too much water.
Yeah, it does. Way, way too much. You have to know your varieties. You have to know what they're going to be like when they're good to eat. And when they get to the point where they're not going to be good,
you have to say bye and thanks for all the fish.
Yeah. I have to say thanks for all the fish and goodbye.
Yeah, something like that. So be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because obviously we're going to be doing lots more. And once we run out of things in the garden, we'll still have things in the greenhouse.
And we have a lot more that's going to be going on here besides that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Somewhere in here we need to do some basic maintenance too, except it'll probably be too cold for some of the basic maintenance by that time. Can't win for losing sometimes.
Say goodbye, Irene.
Until next time. Bye.
Bye. Keep brainstorming.